Hello and welcome to Get the Table, another wrestling roundtable discussion podcast with myself, Adam Wilborn, and the Dadley Boyz of WhatCulture, Michael Hamlet and Michael Sidgwick, here to discuss another burning wrestling issue. But before we get into it, if you're a fan of this sort of thing, make sure you subscribe to WhatCulture Wrestling on either iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts from, for daily wrestling podcasts where we review Raw, SmackDown, the Wednesday Night War between AEW and NXT, pay-per-views, we have interviews, more roundtable discussions like this one, and a roundup of the week, complete with a bloody good quiz, of course, on WrestleCulture. But as I said, joined by Michael Hamlet and Michael Sidgwick. And gents, we are gathered here today to answer a very important question. What the hell is a boneyard match? Michael Hamlet, start us off after last night's Monday Night Raw, where AJ Styles challenged The Undertaker to a boneyard match.
Well, AJ Styles knew what a boneyard match was, didn't he? He was so excited and confident. He couldn't wait to unveil this incredible stipulation that he'd come up with. A boneyard match, in a nutshell, which ruins the whole premise of this podcast, I suppose, is to basically do an Undertaker-style match when they don't want to talk about Undertaker-style stipulations. So what it does allow for is wild speculation, but the reality is a payoff that will prove to disappoint. It won't be like that quite scary bit of The Lion King where there's just loads of elephant bones and things like that. It won't be some sort of scrapyard akin to WCW in 1999. It'll be lots of like literal smoke and mirrors. There'll be tons of purple smoke gushing out of various corners and graveyards without them actually saying graves or bringing up the imagery of death or anything like that. It could be good because if and when Undertaker falls over doing a tombstone or a last ride, they can at least just say, "Whoa, stop. Okay, go back and do that bit again." So it could actually be one of the more entertaining Undertaker matches of the last few years, but it just won't be what people think it might.
I have got something to let you know about, boys, right? It's a hack's trick, right? It's a hack's trick for any writer to say the Collins English Dictionary describes X and X, right? But I'm not, this is an article, this is a podcast, so I'm going to do exactly that, right? I've Googled Boneyard. I've Googled Boneyard. So hold on to your dicks.
I mean, we're on Skype things. That's all I've been doing the whole time we've been recording.
Chat roulette. An aircraft boneyard or aircraft graveyard is a storage area for aircraft that are retired from service. Most aircraft at boneyards are either kept for storage with some maintenance or have their parts removed for reuse or resale and are then scrapped. Now, you might think that it's just a coincidence and they can't say graveyard because of the optics, and they're just saying boneyard instead because what's a graveyard got in it? Bones, boneyard. That's a weird thing. No one says that. Yes, precisely. No one says that. No one thinks of it as death. It's about death, whatever. But look at this definition carefully. And it says, is a storage area for aircraft that are retired from service. Now, the verbiage that AJ Styles has been using suggests that he thinks that The Undertaker's in a boneyard already. I don't think he's an aircraft.
He's a member of the plane community.
The plane community. But regardless, I think in a big ceremonial retiring of The Undertaker, AJ Styles is just going to put him on a plane.
And fly him back to his home planet. She finally picks off.
Mark Calloway died on the way back to his home planet.
He didn't die, but he's a yard of bones or something.
So the thing about a boneyard is that, right, it can, when I hear the word yard, I think of Roman Reigns because he's been saying it for 10 years or whatever long it's been. But when I think of the word boneyard, I think either the Junkyard Invitational of WCW or it's their way of saying, look, it's a buried alive match, lads, but we can't say it's a buried alive match because, the optics. But like it has to be a buried alive match. If you listen to what he's been saying promo wise, he's been saying that he wants to bury the Undertaker. He's going to use the same plot that Michelle McCool used, that bloody wench, to bury his career. So if you look at the semantic field, it's all about burials, except when he first cut that promo at the expense of The Undertaker on Raw, when the program got actually quite good, he mentioned that he's going to kill The Undertaker. He did say this. He's going to make The Undertaker die in the middle of that ring. He's going to take the Undertaker's soul, and he will, and I quote AJ Styles here as part of an investigation, put the final nail in the coffin myself. So is it a casket match? And the Undertaker just happens to already be a big pile of bones, so there's no flesh to go in the casket, purely some bones.
So there's going to be a casket that he's going to put him in. Then he's going to try and bury the casket, but then a tiger is going to appear and savage AJ Styles, so that all that is left is just blood and bones in the Undertaker's yard. And now we've got our finish. It all
what do you guys make of the speculation that we read online recently? Like you say, there's a lot of permutations with death and the things surrounding the Undertaker that they don't want to go near. But what do you make of the assumption that we may see a sort of reinvention of the Undertaker going forward?
Right. I don't want to piss on anyone's chips who's tired of the dead man persona, or who realistically wants to return to the American Badass or Booger Red. Booger Red. I don't know why anyone would want that to come back.
I want Jim Ross to give that nickname to somebody in AEW just so you have to use it sometimes. It's all Booger Red.
Oh, Booger Red. I should know it's Booger Red. It's written all over his ass.
The booger and the blade.
Regardless, you've got me off track here. This is what you do. The thing about this speculation is that we need to consider the source of who's been saying it. Notorious BS Merchant has been connecting the dots. And I think he's connected the dot that AJ Styles has been talking about, how he's not the same. He wants the other Undertaker. Well, the American Badass, I think it's an exercise in dot connection by a hack with no sources, unfortunately. Or fortunately, because I hated the American Badass. I thought it was absolutely lame. He wrestles like the American Badass nowadays.
Like that weird run-in he made where he flipped the table with his top off. That was more American Badass Undertaker from like the depths of 2003 than it was the most recent one, wasn't it? Like, yes. And depending on where they film it, you could see him getting to ride a bike, and he always really loved any situation where he could indulge in his like non-dead man related hobbies. So this, like, the weird opportunities visually that this could provide is probably sending the Undertaker wild with excitement.
Well, you mentioned it there, Hamflet. You talk about where they're going to be filming it, and we've been reading recently about them doing it on a closed set and what have you. Where do you think it's going to take place?
I don't know. On like the side of a road that connects Full Sail University and the Performance Center, because it feels like the entire WrestleMania will be staged there. This fanciful idea of like using the Manhattan Center or other locations that are famed within WWE lore. Nah, there's just a line of production trucks on one long spread of like Floridian highway. So anywhere where they can get some like outside space, they'll do some bits. They'll probably use bits of Full Sail University because that's a filming location in general, isn't it? I welcome them getting silly, much like in the John Cena Bray Wyatt match. This show needs this. Like, it desperately needs this as much as possible. Anything that makes you forget that you're watching a show that should have a crowd and hasn't got one, I actually welcome it. So even if there's somewhere, you know, they're in Florida, even somewhere with a pool set up so you can have AJ heckling to saying, you want to get back in the pool, dead man? You want to get in with your wife and a tiger, dead man? And then like it's AJ that gets thrown in the pool or something. Just I'm all for big daft visuals in a match like this because they can't deliver a wrestling match in the traditional sense that'll be half as good in an empty venue.
Sid, who do you see getting involved in this match? It would make sense, obviously, to have Carl Anderson, Luke Gallows attempt to be involved, considering their run-ins with The Undertaker recently. Speculation, of course, whether or not Michelle McCool could feature in this, considering her name's been dropped so often. Could you see that happening, Sid?
I would quite like to see it just from a pure banter perspective. I don't know why. In fact, I do know why. I know precisely why. I was about to say, I don't know why they're mentioning Michelle McCool so much, but Paul Heyman's writing this. And he bloody loves hating women or just reducing them down to the status of shrews. So I think that's why Michelle McCool's involved. Can you imagine the pop? Actually, no one's there. Can you imagine the pop online or the buzz online if in this graveyard boneyard match where there's all these spooky trees except the palm trees because it's in Florida, so they're gonna have to CGI the trees. If Carl Anderson and Luke Gallows are going to emerge from behind the trees in an attempt to like get the Undertaker and get him from behind for the 3-on-1 advantage. The pop when Michelle McCool pops out of another palm tree and just blasts AJ Styles with her superior Styles Clash. Like, can you imagine? And then like it's still 3-on-2, so like the OC get the numbers advantage, and then the Tiger comes out. So let's make an impromptu match for right here, right now, player. The OC versus the Undertaker, Michelle McCool, and that Tiger from the pool.
It's going to be a big moment for the local truthers amongst us that when she hits that Styles Clash. That's going to be the pop. You're going to see a lot of GIFs on Twitter all of a sudden of like Layla and Michelle McCool pulling the woman's title belt in half and just saying it's more valuable than TNA's top title on its best day.
We're having a laugh here, right? We're having a laugh. But like, and again, I'm going to do the bingo. I'm going to mention AEW, right? Because there's a direct comparison based on like recent developments from both companies. When AEW were about to do the cage match, I think the general perception among fans was, oh, thank Christ, they're more likely than not going to bin off the escape. That's complete bollocks. Thank God, real cage matches are coming back. When AEW were going to announce the rules for Blood and Guts, I think a lot of people were going, oh, Christ almighty, get in. The old WCW rules are back and we don't have the pinfalls, which seems to betray the old spirit of war games. It's a tale of two companies where when AEW, and it could be like Ring of Honor or Impact announcing a new stipulation, maybe not Impact, but when AEW will release the fact that they're going to do a new stipulation match that's in their history. This company's got such a track record of delivering that I think fans seem to like enjoy the discourse in good faith about what it's going to be. The second that stupid term came out of AJ Styles' match, Boneyard. The second that came out of his mouth, everyone was like, time to take the piss. What could this possibly be? What bollocks could this possibly entail? Which leads me to think that it's going to take a long time. I think they're potentially halfway getting there with Paul Heyman's Raw. But the fact that we're doing this podcast, every single meme I've seen online, it's going to take so long for WWE to reverse this perception they have of the dumbass company, to be perfectly honest. Like they're going to have to do like, not months, like maybe even years of solid to really good television, so that when they come out with some bollocks like a new match stipulation, the default response isn't going to be, that's going to be a load of crap, can't wait for this. Like, what idiotic escapade are they going to get into next? It's like the Flying Hellfish episode of The Simpsons when Monty Burns is standing in the rain opposite Abe Simpson and he says, God damn it, can't you go 5 seconds without embarrassing yourself? And then literally like a split second later, the suspenders break, they fall down, and he's got like the boxer shorts on. It's like a split second. He goes, oh, how long was that?
I got this feeling when AJ said Boneyard. It put me back to the House of Horrors moment when for weeks all they said was House of Horrors, House of Horrors. It's Bray Wyatt, he's spooky. It's Boneyard, it's The Undertaker, it's spooky. What was WWE's version of spooky that time? Randy Orton sitting in work trousers in a limo with no top on, which had like nice glassware in it, and a mucky fridge inside Bray Wyatt's house. It wasn't so much something that was loyal to the story. It was something that you couldn't possibly imagine in whatever stupid scenario you came up with. And I just think, in light of the circumstances placed upon them by this WrestleMania, it's best to not think of the specifics, because then you will be surprised by the proverbial or very literal mucky fridge of the Boneyard match.
It's interesting you mentioned that, Hamper, there, because we've seen WWE's response when it's their clever, in their eyes, invented concept, as opposed to like the Ultimate Deletion, for example, which they just, sold down the river effectively. Before we get on to who you reckon's going to win this match, talk us through some of WWE's, I don't want to say novelty matches, but their original concepts for matches and how they fared in the past.
Well, The Undertaker's guilty of a lot of them, really, isn't he? Like, I suppose at least the coffin match and the buried alive match, as daft as they are, they fit the profile of that particular character. But I'm pretty sure the concrete crypt would be a stretch even for him. The idea that you submerge a fellow human being up to his neck in concrete and then have a match to determine who was going to pull the lever. it's not just the fact that you're going to potentially commit a murder on a pay-per-view, but it's the idea that a person would just have a life or death scenario placed on the result of a wrestling match. I love it whenever WWE think, well, no, we can't settle that possibly with intervention from the police or the local authorities or anything like that. We're going to settle it in that ring. So the Undertaker pulling the lever on Paul Bearer was of his own volition because he's the dead man and he was making him weak and all that. But the idea being that if he'd lost the match, it'd just happen anyway. Like the sort of thought that were like, well, all right, I'll take the match. Goldust saying to like Marlena accepting for Brian Pillman. All right, yeah, I'll take the match. Yes, if Brian Pillman beats Goldust, I have to go and live with him for 30 days. And the implication was sex slave. And then she was dragged out in bondage gear on television with Pillman. And we all knew what he was doing, fellas. But like, it was just that Goldust would even allow that to be agreed upon over the course of a Raw promo. It's always when these stipulations, as daft as they are just accepted by the wrestlers that I think is this gaping plot hole. I will give this to the nascent AEW so far. Whenever we've had this with Cody Rhodes, whenever there was a younger fan base that maybe weren't prepared or didn't quite understand how these stipulations would work, they built it into the character as to why he would take on these challenges from MJF, these seemingly absurd and difficult challenges. There was a logical character reason for that. In WWE, they just kind of blow that away and they say, well, I suppose there is a pay-per-view in Sunday, so we might as well put it all on the line and just see what happens at the end of a 3 count. And this is another one of those. Yes, AJ's teased The Undertaker into having a match, but we know nothing of the stipulation, knowingly so. And what we did see on Raw was that The Undertaker lives a pretty happy life. He's letting tigers in his swimming pool. So if Mark Calloway is the kind of weakened state that AJ Styles accuses him of being, why would he bother with it? Like, why would he bother entering the boneyard for this when his life is, objectively pretty sweet?
Sage, what do you make of it all?
Yeah, it's without knowing the nature of the exact stipulation, it's difficult obviously to know how this ranks among the very worst. But if you look at the Undertaker's history with like bespoke gimmick matches, the omens are not great. The casket match was like a really horrific visual for the young fans watching. I was always freaked out by the casket matches, but when you watch them through the lens of an adult who's actually making the decisions to purchase these pay-per-views in the main, especially when they're 50 plus years old in WWE's core demographic, you've got a match that's very hokey. The implication is that you have to kill someone to win, or else you're going to be a good sport and let them out of the casket afterwards. And it's faintly ridiculous. And in terms of the actual in-ring content and the quality, the ultimate objective is to roll somebody into something else. And it's not really great or dramatic. It's like the worst kind of struggle. It's not like this great grappling match on the mat. You're basically just through force of will trying to throw usually a big fat guy through some ropes and into a container. It's just not great athletic theater like professional wrestling at its best is. And the Buried Alive match was much the same, except there was a little bit longer to do brawl devoid of like that near fall drama, and it all sort of very cooperatively went over to the burial plot. These words are ridiculous. I could never take them seriously. What else has Taker done? Like the last Ride match, it was all just quite goofy. It was all quite goofy stuff. And I expect
the Inferno match.
Well, that was more of a Kane one, and I liked it because the sidewalk slam is boring. Some flames that shoot up are more entertaining. You know what was absolutely great, and you actually tether it to reality? The Boiler Room Brawl.
Yes.
In SummerSlam 1996, because you can readily believe that someone like Mankind, who was like the manifestation of like society's rejection and like an outcast, like that guy would hover around a Boiler Room Brawl, and it was very, very violent for its time, for its company. So that was really good. But again, that was a Mankind creation, or created for Mankind. With The Undertaker, like the previous, is not good at all. And I can't wait for this Boneyard match, man. It's exactly the kind of bollocks tonic that I need. I need to see actual bones. Like, I need to see bones with funny names that I can do in the AJ Styles voice to get me through this crisis. Like, not a shin bone, but more like a femur. Femur.
I want Styles to roll along the ground and then accidentally bump shoulders with like this skeletal hand that's reaching out the ground in a callback to that old Undertaker spot, but it's just a skeleton, and then the fingers start moving independent. He's like, whoa, what the hell's that? Like there. And he gets like Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson to kick them away like flowers in the in-betweeners.
The skeleton of Rowan Spider reanimated.
Brilliant.
Finally, we know about the Undertaker's track record at WrestleMania, of course, but this is unlike any other WrestleMania ever, and this match might be unlike any other match ever. So, could you see the Undertaker perhaps even losing this match to inform some further storyline going forward? We've speculated a lot about WrestleMania match outcomes being changed because of the nature of this year's WrestleMania. Could that play into this at all?
No.
Pamphlet, help me out.
I thought when this match was first booked that you really could have AJ Styles win this. The Undertaker's no longer got a streak. He's no longer got anything that he needs to particularly work towards as a character, not least on WrestleMania, where he lost a few years ago and we all had to cry and write #thank you Taker because he took his hat and gloves off.
What did you do? Hamflet, tell the people of YouTube what you did instead of crying the day after WrestleMania 33.
I bollocked him in an article for playing with people's emotions when he was a complete fraud. And I got all sorts of grief for it. And I don't get to throw around #Hamflet was right very often, but I knew he'd be back next year because there's money to be made, baby. I want to buy tigers. It's just nothing. It's nice. The Undertaker theoretically now is nice. Wilborn, you were in that Raw crowd when he didn't appear at WrestleMania, but he did on Raw. He is still a man that can make moments. Not this year, there's nobody in the building, but theoretically, he's a guy that can do things for people because he feeds into almost every wrestling fan's history of watching pro wrestling. So there's absolutely, I don't want him to retire. I don't like those fantasy booking scenarios. I didn't like it then when it was Ted DiBiase Jr. I don't like it now when it's Bray Wyatt or Aleister Black. He's just around. He's just a guy that's going to be about as and when he wants, with occasional bangers like the Graveyard Dogs and occasional situations like this where we just don't know what's going to happen. So there's definitely a value to it. But I don't know. I don't think that this WrestleMania now needs storyline implications beyond belts. When there's titles on the line, I kind of understand it, but it would be much, I don't know, it'd feel far more satisfying if for the first time in a long time, WrestleMania actually was a season finale. There isn't a need for there to be loads of content on Raw and SmackDown coming out of WrestleMania. They might just have to tape the odd 2 or 3 matches. We're not getting the whole roster every week on Mondays and Fridays. So there is a sense where you could actually have some finality for AJ. He could lose this match because it's in a boneyard. The thick idiot picked a boneyard match to fight the Undertaker. And give AJ Styles a month off work because he's been throwing himself on his back pretty continuously since he signed for the company in 2016. This is a nice little write out for a character where he can participate and come back, and it was just a bit of fun. And fingers crossed, when we reach a future again where audience members are getting let back in, it's like a nice reset for AJ. And this can just be like a slightly humorous chapter that we go back and revisit for podcasts like these in 5 years.
To be less of a pedantic, usual tosspot self, I do think that this has got Taker winning all over it. It's one of those where when AJ Styles was cutting that promo at the expense of the Undertaker, they harken back to that, and he could maintain that attitude throughout, having beaten the Undertaker, and then he could have a total tear run as a mega heel on Raw after WrestleMania, and he could be the one to challenge Drew McIntyre. I think Drew McIntyre versus AJ Styles, if allowed to be its best uninhibited self, will be a really, really strong program for
the Roman Reigns model, isn't it?
Yeah, proper Roman Reigns model. That stuff in 2016 was fantastic. AJ Styles isn't quite the worker he was there, but I do think as a character, as a performer, he's got that cachet where you could take him seriously as a B-level pay-per-view challenger. But the more Undertaker this gets, the more likely it is that the Undertaker wins the match. I mean, it's a boneyard match. It's ridiculous. Unless your man, Kevin Nash, is going to come in and just lead a troop of 12, 13, 14 heels into the boneyard and then bury the Undertaker. Yeah, it's just, if it's a casket match or something like that. Then again, with the buried alive matches, they were often used to write the Undertaker out.
That's what I was thinking, yeah.
He's lost a few of these, isn't he? Coffin matches and the like. He's lost the other one too.
You know what? AJ Styles. It's going to win.
The bow tie.
The Undertaker's going to win. AJ Styles isn't going to beat the Undertaker at WrestleMania. It's WrestleMania is the big difference maker for me. Undertaker's going to win.
My only thing is I've just popped into my head is how they're going to crowbar the fact that AJ Styles is called the Phenomenal One, and if you put a B at the start of one, what do you get?
bone. You get bone.
Doesn't work verbally, but visually.
You
The
know,
Undertaker.
that was like getting grit in the eyes because I just thought you were going to say phenomenal and phenom. I just thought that was where you were going. No, Wilborn's got a bone gag coming.
No, I mean, that was obvious to me, but I thought, hang on, I'm sure there's some sort of skeleton bollocks we can get in here
Phenomenal
somehow.
bone.
Well, let us know your thoughts on the Boneyard match set for WrestleMania 36 between The Undertaker and AJ Styles in the comments section below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to What Culture Wrestling on either iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from for daily wrestling podcasts. Plus, you can let us know your thoughts on Twitter at WhatCultureWWE. Watch there, follow all three of us. You can follow Michael Hamflett at
Michael Hamflett.
Follow Michael Sidgwick at
Femur. No, at M. Sidgwick.
Follow me at Adam Wilbone. You can follow us all at What Culture.
Utter dick.
Follow us all at What Culture WWE. This has been Get the Table. My thanks to the Dadley Boyz. Thank you for watching, and we will see you soon.